The C-130 touched down hard, its wheels screeching against the tarmac. It was 0:30, the dead of night. The air was thick and hot, even before the sun had thought about rising. It felt like stepping into an oven. We were in Kuwait. This was not Iraq, not yet, but it was the gateway, the staging ground for what was to come. But it was close enough. We had been briefed back in Germany, told what to expect, but nothing could truly prepare us. They told us to expect heat, the kind that saps your strength and leaves you drenched in sweat. They told us to expect sand, fine grains that would get into everything, our clothes, our gear, even our food. They told us to expect the unexpected, to be ready for anything and everything. Mostly they told us to be ready. Ready for the unknown, ready for the challenges ahead. A lone figure stood at the end of the tarmac, waiting. He was silhouetted against the dim lights of the airfield, a shadowy presence. Even from a distance we could tell he was a lifer, someone who had seen it all. He carried himself differently. He had a presence, an air of authority that was unmistakable. We grabbed our gear and shuffled off the plane, the weight of our packs a familiar burden. "Welcome to the sandbox, gentlemen," the figure said as we approached. His voice was gruff but welcoming. "Name's Sergeant Miller. Your ride ain't leaving without you." He gave us a nod and we knew we were in good hands. Sergeant Miller wasn't kidding. There was an SUV waiting for us at the edge of the tarmac. It was black. All business. No markings to indicate what branch of the military it belonged to. The windows were tinted. We could see the silhouettes of men inside, but their faces were obscured. "Move it, ladies!" Miller barked. "You think this is a vacation?" We ran towards the SUV, our boots crunching on the gravel. The air was thick with the smell of jet fuel and something else, something metallic, something that reminded me of blood. We reached the SUV and stopped. One by one we handed our IDs to the man in the passenger seat. He looked at each one carefully before waving us through. We piled into the back of the SUV. There were no seats, just the cold, hard metal floor beneath us. We sat on our rucksacks, trying to make ourselves as comfortable as possible in the cramped space. Our weapons cradled in our arms, we exchanged nervous glances, knowing what lay ahead. The man who had checked our IDs turned around, his expression unreadable. He had a hard face and eyes that looked like they had seen too much, eyes that had witnessed the horrors of war. "All right, listen up," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "This ain't basic training anymore, this is the real deal. We're going over the border soon and things are gonna get real interesting, real fast." The gravity of his words settled in. We were about to enter hostile territory. The threat level is high. You see anything suspicious, you report it immediately. You feel threatened, you fire. No hesitation. His words were clear and direct. You feel threatened, you fire. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of responsibility. We all knew what he meant. This wasn't a game. This was a matter of life and death. This was life and death. Every decision we made could be our last. He continued. "No warning shots, you shoot to kill, understand?" We nodded, our throats too dry to speak, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Section 4, Convoy to the Border. The SUV took us to a staging area. It was a sea of tents and vehicles. We could hear the constant drone of generators and the chatter of radios. We were herded onto shuttle buses. The windows were covered with thick curtains. We couldn't see where we were going. We drove for what felt like hours. The bus finally came to a stop. The doors hissed open and we were greeted by a wall of heat. We stepped off the bus, blinking in the harsh sunlight. We were in the middle of the desert, sand stretched out in every direction. The convoy formed up, Humvees and trucks all painted in that same desert tan. We were ready to move. Section 5, A Strange Welcome. The convoy crossed the border into Iraq, a land that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. It felt like crossing into another world, a world dominated by endless stretches of barren desert. The landscape was the same, sand and more sand, stretching as far as the eye could see, with the occasional rocky outcrop breaking the monotony. But there was a different feeling in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to cling to everything. A tension, a sense of anticipation. Every soldier was on high alert, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. As we drove, we began to see people, small clusters of civilians appearing on the roadside. Children ran alongside the road waving enthusiastically, their faces lit up with excitement and curiosity. Adults stood by the roadside smiling and giving us the thumbs up, their gestures a mix of hope and gratitude. Some held up signs welcoming us to Iraq, their messages written in both English and Arabic. They were asking for food, for water, for anything we could spare. Their needs were immediate and pressing. It was a strange juxtaposition, this mix of war and welcome, conflict and hospitality. We were here to fight, and yet we were being greeted like liberators, a paradox that was hard to reconcile. Overhead, a pair of Apache helicopters flew low and slow, their presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked, watching over us, providing cover, their rotors chopping through the air, a reassuring sound in this foreign land. We were a long way from home, in a place that felt both strange and hostile. But we were not alone. We had each other, and the support of our comrades. The enemy was out there somewhere, hiding, waiting, every shadow, every movement was scrutinized. And that, in a way, was a good thing. It meant they were afraid of us, cautious of our presence. It meant we had the upper hand, a sense of empowerment that bolstered our resolve.